Confucius, or Master Kong, is a Chinese philosopher from about 500 years before the birth of Jesus, so a little bit before Socrates. He's famous for his ethics, taught in his book, The Analects. I say his book. It's not a book by him. It's a book about him. It's a collection of sayings from him and anecdotes about him compiled by his followers, or possibly by their followers. Confucius lived in the declining years of the Zhou dynasty. This is spelled Z-H-O-U in the new system for transliterating Chinese into English, the pinyin system. In the older system, the way Giles' transliteration system, it's C-H-A-U. So you may be inclined to look at that and say Zhu or Chao, but neither of these is correct. Zhou is closer. Zhou may still be in poor pronunciation, but it will do for those who are learning. And Confucius, by the way, is really big on learning. He does not claim to have any great wisdom of his own. What he claims about himself is that he loves learning at least as much as anyone else, and he is working on that. He is learning. He is attempting to gain knowledge all the time. Now, Confucius revered the early Zhou rulers, especially the Duke of Zhou, and the rules of propriety they had set up, the rituals and the customs they had established for bringing harmony and order to the country. Now, in his era, the rituals had declined, and everything else had declined. Politics was a mess, governance was a mess, various rulers are squabbling and vying for power, and the Zhou king, who's supposed to be ruling over them, well, his power is waning. Confucius considers the decline of China to be rooted in a decline of virtue. He wants peace and order to be restored, and so he wants to return to virtue, and he wants to return to these rituals that cultivate it. And he wants people of all positions in life to live properly according to their station. Now, this includes submission to higher authority, but it also includes exercising your own authority properly. So his message is not only to submit to the higher authority, but his message to the higher authority is to exercise that authority virtuously, not to lord it over people, not to exercise raw power, but to lead by virtue and lead by ritual and to exercise benevolence. There's a common theme in ancient Confucian literature, which is an application of the Golden Rule to our position in life. Serve those of higher authority as you would wish to be served by those below you in authority. Benevolently rule those below you as you would wish to be benevolently ruled by those in authority over you. Confucius thought that peace and order would only be restored by this kind of virtue, and this virtue did necessitate a return to the old rituals. Let's say something about those rituals. Confucianism is deeply concerned with ritual. The word here is li. Confucius has inherited, or at least his civilization has inherited, the religious and the ethical practices of ancient China as they were shaped by the early Zhou dynasty. Ritual, li, has a strong religious component, but he's reconsidering ritual as an ethical concept. So consider, for example, what is accomplished by a handshake, or what is accomplished by saying please and thank you, or by a ritual bow, such as is required by customs in Confucian China. What is accomplished by saying, hello, how are you? And I'm fine, thanks, how are you? A ritual is a bodily expression of principles. With the right rituals, it is an expression of the truth about right and wrong. Consider the mutual respect in our greeting rituals. Say I say, hello, how are you? I may not be literally asking you how you're doing. You might not be doing well. You might, if you were going to answer literally, say, oh, I didn't get enough sleep last night, and I'm a little worried about my financial situation and the political situation in my country. I don't like our current governance, and all the things you might complain about to your friends. You might list those if you were to give a literal answer to the question, hello, how are you? But you don't. At least normal people normally do not answer this question literally by saying how they are. They say something like, fine, thanks, how are you? And I think a good Confucian analysis of this is that this is an exactly correct way to answer, because the point of the greeting ritual is not to seek information about how someone else is doing. The major point of the greeting ritual is to acknowledge that the other person is there and that the other person matters. When you say to me, hello, how are you? That is what you are communicating to me. When I say, fine, thanks, how are you? I am returning this acknowledgement. In fact, we are expressing the golden rule. Each of us is treating the other how we want to be treated. This is a symmetrical. This is a symmetrical ritual. Mutual respect for the from one human to another, and vice versa, is expressed in the greeting ritual. The Confucian ritual bow to parents or to rulers is a sort of bodily expression of some of the non-symmetrical relationships of which society is made up. But the golden rule still applies to these non-symmetrical relationships, as we've seen. Exercise with respect to the person above you, the same sort of behavior you would want to be treated with by people below you, and exercise to them the sort of behavior you would expect to receive from people above you. So the golden rule is very central. Let's say something about that. In Confucianism, right and wrong are analyzed as objective realities. What is right because it's rooted in the nature of things. As near as I can tell, Confucianism fits very well in the natural law tradition. It's not the Western natural law tradition, but it is a sort of natural law ethics. What is right because it's rooted in the way of things. There's an important word, Tao. The Tao is the right way to live, the way. It's the right way to live. And one of the important principles of the Tao is actually the golden rule. Confucius famously expressed the golden rule in negative terms. Do not do to others what you want them not to do to you. There is, though, a strong sense of a positive golden rule in Confucius. If you want to be established, he says, seek first to establish others. The virtuous person wishing to be enlarged seeks also to enlarge others. And there's this wonderful sentence in the Analects where we read, to be able to judge what is right with respect to others by what is close to ourselves. This may be called the art of virtue. For me to be able to judge what is necessary in my treatment of you by what I understand to be necessary with respect to myself is the art of virtue. I am virtuous if I can do that, if I can understand that and then live by it, if I can treat you the way I know that I need to be treated. This is the art of virtue, and this is the golden rule. So the positive golden rule, as far as I can tell, is not explicitly and universally stated in Confucianism, but it is stated in particular things. If you wish to be enlarged or established, do the same for others. And it is sort of implied universally. In all things, judge what is right with respect to others by what we know to be right with respect to ourselves. And here are some other observations of regarding the Tao, or the content of what is right and wrong. Confucianism can be understood as very, to a large extent, emphasizing the way of knowing what is right, the way of teaching what is right by means of ritual and so on. But to some extent, it is also possible to identify the principles. The golden rule is a key one. The principles of right and wrong also includes this. A good person cares for the good of all. There's a sort of emphasis in the Confucian Analects of universal humanity and the importance of that. All within the four C's are his brothers is a famous line associated with Confucius. What that means is all human beings have the same sort of right to expect proper treatment from us as our own family members. A good ruler will rule by means of virtue and by virtuous ritual, not by laws and punishment. There's another ethical point from the Tao. Let's see, a few more quick points. Self-cultivation is crucial. Self-cultivation is the root of social change. It's the root of social justice. Fix yourself in order to improve your society. It is difficult, perhaps impossible, to find a person who is completely virtuous. Confucius will say this sort of thing, but always apply yourself to becoming virtuous. We must always strive to be virtuous. Maybe you've never met a person who is fully virtuous, but always strive to be that person yourself. When you have faults, do not fear to abandon them, says Confucius. Now, virtue is, or at least leads to, a unity or harmony, and we'll close on this point. Virtue leads to a harmony in several different spheres. There's a harmony between our nature as human beings and our principles. There's a harmony between our lives and those principles. There's a harmony between how we treat others and how we treat ourselves. Note, harmony between our principles and our nature. Harmony must also be established between our lives and those principles. We must have the right principles that fit our human nature, and we must live by those principles. And there must be the golden rule, harmony between how we treat others and how we treat ourselves. And there should be harmony in how we treat all humans because of the universal obligations of universal humanity. And then finally, all of these correction of principles, correction of behavior, self-cultivation, practice of the right rituals, all of this will establish a harmonious society. Okay, this has been a very brief introduction to some of the main ideas in the Confucian Analects. I strongly recommend reading it. You can find any number of good recent translations. The old translation by James Legge is public domain on the internet. It's sort of like the King James translation of the Confucian Analects. It is old, venerable, quite good, quite useful, still relevant, but not on the whole the best translation, but also cheap, in fact free on the internet, like the King James. It's not a bad place to start. Newer translations can be found, published by Oxford, for example. The Oxford World Classics edition is very helpful, has a helpful introduction, and it has helpful notes. Also, I'd recommend, if you want to study further, any number of books. You can find them for yourselves, but here are two I'll mention that have helped me. A very short introduction to Confucianism. Pardon me, I think it's called Confucianism, A Very Short Introduction, published by Oxford, part of their Very Short Introductions series, and Herbert Fingeret's book, Confucius, The Secular as Sacred. I believe that's the title. Those are good books for studying further, but nothing substitutes for the Analects itself. I strongly recommend reading it.